The starship Endless Horizon had traveled for 17 years through the dark spaces between galaxies. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the observation deck and watched as her vessel approached the planet that no species in the known universe had ever visited and returned from. The world was called Sanctuary Prime by the ancient star maps, and it glowed with a strange blue light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Behind her, the alien ambassador named Crickstar made a sound of deep concern. His forearms crossed over his chest, and his purple scales shifted color to show his worry. The Crickstar species had lived among the stars for over 10,000 years, and they considered themselves the wisest beings in the cosmos. They had warned humanity not to come here. They had said that the sacred pool of Sanctuary Prime was not meant for young species like humans. Elena turned to face the ambassador with calm determination in her eyes. She was 53 years old, but the gray in her hair did not make her weak. It made her experienced. She had seen more of the universe than most humans ever would, and she had learned that the galaxy was filled with wonders that older species had forgotten how to appreciate. The ship's scientist, Dr. Marcus Chun, approached with a tablet in his hands. His readings showed that the planet below had an atmosphere that humans could breathe, but the energy signatures were unlike anything recorded in galactic databases. The sacred pool was real, and it was waiting for them. Crickstar spoke in his deep, rumbling voice that sounded like stones grinding together. He told Elena that his ancestors had tried to reach the blue Nymph thousands of years ago. They had sent their greatest philosophers, their most powerful warriors, and their oldest leaders. None of them had been judged worthy. The Nymph had looked into their souls and found them lacking, and she had sent them away with nothing but shame. Elena nodded and said that perhaps that was the problem. Perhaps the Crickstar had sent the wrong type of people. They had sent those who believed they deserved wisdom simply because they were old and powerful. The universe did not work that way. The landing craft descended through clouds that shimmered with silver light. Elena had chosen to go alone, despite the protests of her crew. The ancient text that Dr. Chun had discovered spoke of the sacred pool as a place of singular judgment. Only one being could approach at a time, and that being would be measured not by their achievements, but by the truth in their heart. The surface of Sanctuary Prime was covered in forests of crystalline trees that sang when the wind moved through their branches. The ground beneath Elena's boots was soft and warm, like the soil of a garden in spring. She followed a path that seemed to create itself before her, winding through the singing forest toward a glow of deep blue that called to something ancient within her soul. She walked for many hours, and during that time she thought about her life. She remembered being a child on Earth, looking up at the stars and wondering if there was anyone out there who might understand her. She remembered the day she had learned that humanity was not alone, that the galaxy was filled with species far older and more advanced. She remembered the way those species had looked at humans with amusement and pity, as if they were watching children play at being adults. The sacred pool appeared before her as the crystal forest opened into a clearing of impossible beauty. The water was the deepest blue Elena had ever seen, darker than the night sky and yet filled with light that seemed to come from within. The pool was perfectly circular, and its surface was so still that it reflected the cosmos above like a mirror. Elena approached the edge and knelt on the soft ground. She did not know what she was supposed to do. The ancient texts had not explained the ritual. They had only said that those who were pure would receive wisdom, and those who were not would receive nothing. She waited in silence, listening to the distant song of the crystal trees and the beating of her own heart. The water began to move. From the center of the pool, a figure rose slowly into the air. She was made of light and water, and her form shifted and flowed like a living stream. Her skin was the blue of deep oceans, and her eyes were the white of distant stars. She had no wings, but she floated above the water as if gravity had no meaning for her. Her hair flowed around her like currents in the sea, and when she looked at Elena, The human felt as if every moment of her life was being examined at once. The blue nymph spoke, and her voice was like the sound of water falling over ancient stones. She asked Elena why she had come. Elena answered honestly. She said that she had come because humanity was struggling. In the 200 years since first contact with alien species, humans had been treated as lesser beings. They had been denied access to advanced technology, excluded from galactic councils, and treated as amusing pets by species that had achieved space travel, while humanity was still learning to make fire. She had come to ask for wisdom, not for herself, but for her people. The nymph descended until she was floating just above the surface of the pool. She told Elena that many had come before her with similar requests. The Krigstar had asked for wisdom to maintain their empire. The Valoran Collective had asked for wisdom to defeat their enemies. The machine minds of Sector 7 had asked for wisdom to achieve perfect logic. All of them had been denied. Elena asked why they had been denied. The nymph smiled, and her smile was sad. She explained that wisdom could not be used as a tool for power. Those who sought wisdom to gain advantage over others had already failed the test. Wisdom was not about becoming stronger than others. It was about understanding oneself and one's place in the infinite tapestry of existence. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked a question that surprised even herself. She asked what the nymph saw when she looked at humanity. The nymph's form shimmered and changed, showing images in the air between them. Elena saw the history of her species played out in light and shadow. She saw the wars and the cruelty, the greed and the destruction. She saw the way humans had damaged their own world and hurt each other for thousands of years. But she also saw something else. She saw humans reaching out to help strangers. She saw doctors working through the night to save lives. She saw artists creating beauty that moved people to tears. She saw parents sacrificing everything for their children. She saw scientists dedicating their lives to understanding the universe, not for profit, but simply because they wanted to know. She saw soldiers throwing themselves on grenades to protect their friends. She saw ordinary people standing up against injustice, even when it cost them everything. The nymph told Elena that this was what she saw when she looked at humanity. She saw a species that was capable of terrible darkness, but chose, again and again, to reach for the light. She saw a species that had not been given the advantages of age or technology, but had built civilizations and crossed the stars through sheer determination. She saw a species that fell down constantly, but always got back up. Elena felt tears on her cheeks, though she had not realized she was crying. The nymph reached out and touched Elena's forehead with fingers that felt like cool water on a hot day. She said that the other species had failed her test because they had come seeking power. They had believed that wisdom would make them superior. But Elena had come seeking understanding. She had not asked for wisdom to defeat humanity's rivals. She had asked for wisdom to help her people find their place in the universe. The knowledge flowed into Elena's mind like a river breaking through a dam. She saw the truth of the cosmos, the way all things were connected, the ancient patterns that governed the dance of stars and the birth of life. She understood that the older species were not superior, merely different. She understood that humanity's youth was not a weakness, but a strength, because young species still had the capacity to grow and change and become something new. She understood that wisdom was not about knowing all the answers. It was about asking the right questions and being brave enough to face whatever answers came. When Elena opened her eyes, the nymph was watching her with something like hope. She told Elena that humanity was special, not because they were better than other species, but because they still believed in the possibility of becoming better. The older species had grown tired and cynical. They had stopped dreaming. But humans still looked at the stars with wonder, still believed that tomorrow could be different from today. Elena asked what she should do with this wisdom. The nymph said that was for Elena to decide. Wisdom could not be given like a gift. It could only be awakened in those who were ready to receive it. Elena had proven herself pure, not because she was perfect, but because she had been honest about her imperfections. She had not pretended to be worthy. She had simply asked for help, and that humility was rarer than all the treasures in the galaxy. The nymph began to sink back into the pool, her form dissolving into the blue water. Before she disappeared, she gave Elena one final piece of wisdom. She said that the galaxy was entering a time of great change. The old empires were fading, and new powers were rising. Humanity would have a choice to make in the centuries ahead. They could become like the species that had looked down on them, or they could forge a different path. The wisdom Elena now carried would help her people make that choice, but it would not make the choice for them. Elena stood alone beside the sacred pool as the last light of the nymph faded beneath the water. She felt different, changed in ways she could not fully describe. The universe seemed larger and more mysterious than before, but also more welcoming. She understood now that humanity did not need to prove itself to the older species. They needed to prove themselves to the cosmos itself, through their actions and their choices. She walked back through the crystal forest as the trees sang their ancient songs. When she reached the landing craft, her crew was waiting with anxious faces. Dr. Chun asked if she had found the nymph, if she had been granted wisdom. Elena smiled and said that she had found something even more valuable. She had found hope. The endless horizon left Sanctuary Prime and began its long journey back to human space. Behind them, the blue planet continued to pulse with its strange light, waiting for the next seeker who might prove worthy of its secrets. Ambassador Crickstar watched Elena with new respect in his eyes. He had never seen anyone return from the sacred pool with such peace on their face. His ancestors had come back angry and bitter, convinced that the nymph was cruel for denying them. But this human woman had found what they could not. He asked Elena what wisdom she would share with humanity. Elena looked out at the stars and said that she would share the most important truth she had learned. That wisdom was not about being better than others. It was about being better than yourself. And that was something humanity had always understood, even when they forgot it. Every generation tried to build a better world for the next. Every parent hoped their children would surpass them. That impulse, that eternal reaching towards something greater, was the purest thing in the universe. The older species had forgotten that truth. They had achieved so much that they stopped trying to achieve more. But humanity was still hungry, still dreaming, still climbing toward heights they could barely imagine. That was why the blue nymph had granted her wish. Because the pure of heart were not those without darkness, but those who refused to let the darkness win. And in the hearts of humanity, the light was still burning bright.